going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 5:06. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Let's. So the next item is public comments. Do we have any public comments cards?
I did not receive.
No. We do have a few public members, but no comment cards, so we will continue. Next item is approval of the minutes. We do need a motion and a second.
Yeah, I'll move the item, Chair.
I'll second it. Without objection, it's 2-4 and one absence for that vote. The next item is an item regarding opportunity zones and enhanced infrastructure financing districts. I vaguely remember we did receive a presentation on this, so hopefully this is just a quick refresher or next steps or something, but whatever it might be, I'll defer to Director Mendoza.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You have seen half of this before. The EIFD portion was presented to you at a meeting where there was many budget items. You were here a little bit long that night. So we're bringing it back to you on the tail end of the discussion for the opportunity zones. It's our first opportunity to present to you some of the opportunity zone things that we want to introduce to you in the next 6 to 7 months. And the consultant we have hired to do that is Larry Cosmont, and he'll be using Elizabeth Hull with BB&K to assist with that effort. Part of Larry's team tonight, Larry has Mr. Brian Moncrief, and then Joe, who you met at a previous committee meeting, will be the support on the EIFD at the end of the presentation. So with it, I will turn it over to Elizabeth Hull and Mr. Larry Cosmont.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Pleasure to be here. My name is Larry Cosmont, Cosmont Companies. I've had the opportunity to work with Santa Ana in the past and really looking forward to kicking off the Opportunity Zone program. Joe Diegas with Cosmont has been working along with myself and SCAG on the EIFD, which is what you kind of saw, and we'll see it again in, I think, a better light. So I will be very efficient, as will Elizabeth, but I wanted to at least provide some overview as to why these two programs are really critical, because I think no city like Santa Ana knows so well that the kinds of projects you have to pursue in a, sort of a generation driven by millennials and Generation Zs, it's really tricky to put your economic development money in the right spots. And so what happens in California is with the dissolution of redevelopment, we now have two programs. One comes to us from the feds called the Opportunity Zone Program, and the others are related to special tax increment financing districts called EIFDs and others. And between the two, they enable us locally to find some of the better projects and put them to work and provide some real economic development stewardship. In this particular case, Santa Ana has a fairly young population. We have a population here that is growing up as digital natives. So what we believe happens with Opportunity Zone projects and EIFDs is we have to target the right product: housing, sustainability, mobility, connectivity. And the point of these is really to provide live, work, and play and connected spaces. So what you're going to see from us is basically a set of programs driven primarily by not only the federal tax program, but by state direction on sustainability and housing. The state has set out some incredibly expansive roles on zero carbon emissions, and that really forces a lot of zoning and utilization changes locally. Same with housing, looking to fulfill these California legislative mandates about clean air quality and housing affordability. So what's in your economic development wallet? You've seen that commercial. This is the way we look at the world at Cosmont. With the death of RDAs in the middle and the advent of opportunity zones also in the middle, and the enhanced infrastructure financing districts that are available to us, we have an extraordinary opportunity in opportunity zones. So why Santa Ana, why opportunity zones? Because they have found you. The governor has basically said that the big opportunity for local government is if you can combine tax increment financing with opportunity zones, this is the big idea. And this is the idea that the state budget is really invested in. So here's what happened in Santa Ana. Out of all of the opportunity zones created in the United States, there's only 8,700 census tracts, over 10% are in California. So we have more than 10% of the marketplace. And in these zones, this is not a zone where the state or local government hands out incentives. Instead, the incentives are driven by a tax code. So hear me out on this. It's very different for most of us. These are geared toward investors that had made a capital gain on another investment. It could be the sale of a business. It could be the sale of property. It could be the sale of a stock. That capital gain is sitting on their balance sheet, and they're going to have to pay taxes on it. And what the Opportunity Zone says, if you invest in a designated opportunity zone, of which we have 11 in Santa Ana, you don't have to pay that tax. You get two benefits. You get a deferral on your tax bill due. So you take your capital gain, and within 180 days, you designate a new investment in an opportunity zone. You defer any payment of tax until 2026, a full 7 years. And if you keep that investment for 10 years and it makes a profit, you pay no taxes at all. There's never been a program like that in the United States. So here's the 3 steps: temporary tax deferral, reduction of capital gains, and a permanent exclusion from any of that capital gain. That is the beauty here, because we get to play, in essence, if we can attract in our zones, and I'm going to let Elizabeth take this in a second, if we can attract, there's 879 zones in California, there's 27 in Orange County, there's 27 in Orange County. If we can attract this money and leverage those tax benefits, then we can take underutilized properties, underutilized vacant lots, businesses that have been looking for investment, and we can move those balance sheet profits into those investments, property or businesses, and basically create tremendous value in this community. That's sort of the gift of opportunity zones. And as the governor says, if you can incorporate that tax transfer, if you will, and tax forgiveness into a business that's local or into a local property and get it developed or improved, you can also augment it with infrastructure funded by an infrastructure financing district. That becomes the elixir for some major investment. I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can talk about a more localized approach.
Thanks. Good evening. So I'm Elizabeth Hull. I'm with Best Best & Krieger. I work with Sonia and your economic development staff in housing. I head the firm's economic development housing practice group. So as Larry was saying, the unique thing about opportunity zones, they're new, only been around since the 2017 Tax Act, and it's really a unique opportunity to invest private funds. So historically, our economic development work has all been taking public money and putting that into a project to try and get someone to invest. This is an opportunity to get the private funds to invest in particular census tracts, communities, and projects that normally wouldn't attract an investment. And like Larry was saying, the benefit is the tax deferral. So you can defer, you have $1 million that you made in capital gains, you don't want to pay the tax on that. You put it into an opportunity zone investment, you defer or forgive your tax obligations. So it's really it's a very different approach to economic development than we've seen in the past. I don't know how to move this. Oh, thank you. So, with opportunity zones, you've got sort of a wide way of doing it. As Larry was saying, you can invest in a business, you can invest in a business asset, you can invest in real estate, housing. So it's a little bit broader than some of the economic development tools we've used in the past. For Santa Ana specifically, or for anyone who's interested, there's sort of a process to get up to speed on the opportunity zones. We recommend, or the way it's sort of set out, is you start with education, make sure your community and the council and the staff are all on the same page. We need to make sure everyone understands how the investments work. Then you need to look at identifying key projects. Not every project is good for an opportunity zone, but we have a lot of land and businesses here in the 11 zones that you have that make it unique and a real opportunity. We need to look at your investment strategy and sort of how you're going to prioritize the projects and marketing those projects out to the community and to the investment pool. One of the key things that as the city we can do is we need to update or look at your economic development plans, so any specific plans, your former RDA plan, your general plan, if you have an economic development element. We want to update those and make sure that they really reflect what it is you're after, what development you want to encourage, and more importantly, that you've talked to your stakeholders so that the community is on board with these projects, because the idea is to streamline and move these projects forward. You want to, if possible, we want to look at updating the specific plans before you even have a specific project so that it's ready to go. There's a lot of competition for this money, and so to get your project streamlined, CEQA approved if possible. There was some legislation pending to sort of streamline the CEQA process for opportunity zone projects. Unfortunately, that didn't make it through the legislature this year. There were some procedural hurdles that got held up. It will be back in January, so we're hopeful. But that's really one of the biggest impediments to any development in California, but opportunity zone development in particular, is getting through the CEQA process and providing that certainty to a developer or an investor that will be able to go forward. And then finally, to market your opportunity zone projects, you want to create a prospectus. The prospectus is really just designed to tell the story of what your property is, why it's good for investment, how it helps an opportunity zone fund. There are different funds out there that focus on different types of investments. So there are opportunity zone funds that are specifically interested in redevelopment of malls or housing or investing in particular types of businesses. So you want to put together prospectus that identify what you have that may meet those needs. And then there are opportunity zone marketing websites and events where you go out and you pitch your prospectus and, oh, we've got this mall or we've got this site, and pitch it towards a particular development investment group or funding source.
Elizabeth, I can add, they're very competitive.
Yes.
So one of the importance of having this team together in the city is to identify really good projects that take two things into perspective: the community's priorities and the investors' priorities. Because these investors, they can go anywhere, 8,700 zones around the United States, and there's 140 funds that have been created. There's billions, 40 billion looking to be invested, but we have to be competitive locally. And part of that's just knowing what we want, which is what Elizabeth is saying, right?
Right, and to attract this money and to get these investors interested in coming to our town, we need to minimize the potential risks for them. And one of those ways we do it is the zoning, the CEQA, streamlining that process for them, and then making sure that your community stakeholders are bought into the projects that you're pursuing. A fund has to turn a profit or invest their money in a certain amount of time, or they lose those tax incentives. So they're very skittish of projects that have a lot of community opposition or of projects that have the potential for litigation. So to the extent that we can get through that CEQA process and reduce that litigation risk, the better positioned we are to attract those funds. And then this is just sort of a summary, just the steps to organize your investment procedure or process that you're going to pursue. Looking at the education of the stakeholders, the communities, the council, the staff, everybody, making sure we're all on the same page, updating those economic plans, updating your land use plans, really trying to identify for the best fit for the opportunity funds, making sure you've got projects that are sellable to particular funds, and then identifying the property and businesses that we may want to invest in, and then again, going out and evaluating and moving the project forward. Yeah, so Larry and I both kind of hit on this one already. There's a lot of money out there. There's, like he said, 140 funds approved and operating. $29 to $30 billion roughly. I think the estimate is, 2.3 trillion was the last I heard in unrealized capital gains funds that are out there that could be invested in opportunity zones. So there's a potential for a lot of money to flow into these projects. We just need to position ourselves well to be competitive to get that money.
So, moving forward, what's next for us locally, as Elizabeth and I have been indicating, is figuring out which of these areas make the most sense for us as a city and a community, as well as for the investor who's going to make a voluntary decision as to where they want to invest. Next for the state is the state has to decide how it's going to help local cities direct this investment to communities. So, for example, and this is an important notion, there are, as you know, 50 states. 41 of them have passed what we call tax conformance laws or have no state income tax. That leaves California in the minority of those states that have not matched the tax benefits on the federal side with the tax benefits for OZ investments on the state side. That's a big discussion. I was just invited by the governor's office last Friday. I was in Sacramento with the Department of Finance. We're still figuring it out in California as to how we're going to allow, if at all, some conformity on the state tax side with the federal tax side. So if you're sitting in Texas looking for an investment and Texas has no state income tax, you get to invest 100% or $100 for every $100 of tax savings in California because of 13-cent tax. You really have $87 to invest. So it's a big haircut. We're talking to Department of Finance. Going forward, I think the point is that we have to do some active marketing and we have to find the best transactions. I'd like to put the pictures of EIFDs and opportunity zones together because there's a terrific local project that has matched its enhanced infrastructure financing district with opportunity zones, and it sits right next door. It's in the city of Placentia, the Old Town and Backing House district. Here's a city that has actually created an enhanced infrastructure financing district that includes some opportunity zones, and it also has been successful in asking the county to give the city some of its property tax dollars for the future development and put them together into this 300-acre plan. So they've created a 300-acre EIFD, including OZs. They have a number of transit-oriented projects. Sound familiar? Because you're about to hear from Joe. Some transit-oriented projects, and the county and the city have now come together in a public financing authority under an EIFD, which is this district map. And Joe, I think that first PFA, new PFA for Placentia and the county met just last week, kicked it off, July 31. So this is off and running. It's a project that Cosmont did with both SCAG, the county, and the city, and it's going to be a tremendous success. And the way it's going to be a success is just like when I showed you that picture of the governor decrying, look, if you put OZs and EIFDs together, you can afford infrastructure, you can bring in new housing, you can bring in new private investment, you can give them a federal tax break, you can generate jobs, you can generate taxes, and improve an area, and you have 45 years to do it. So this is not a haphazard strategy. It is a very deliberate one. I'm going to end with this. You're not alone. There's over 30 communities around the state looking at this strategy and in some form of pursuing it. And we are pleased to be here again with you in Santa Ana pursuing this. I think it really has some longevity and some benefit and for a prosperous future for Santa Ana. Thank you for your attention. If there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Vice Chair Iglesias, we know you got here a little bit late, but any questions you have right now?
Just the last statement that you made about being a 45-year investment,
Yes.
is that for all of the I guess projects and all of the developments that you'll be overseeing here in Santa Ana, or is that like a federal mandate, or why?
Not a federal mandate. The statute that allows Santa Ana and other cities to create a tax increment district allows them to do it for 45 years. So it gives you time to get a benefit from the investments that you create, because you can collect that tax and then you can redirect it right back into the city for those infrastructure improvements. So it's actually a huge benefit to have that lead time, and it's really a long-term strategy that can also have some short-term implications. In fact, Joe Diegues, the second part of this presentation is the presentation that you started to see at some previous meeting, which shows you the specific TIF district, the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District that Santa Ana is looking at. This is the pilot project that, if approved, would go for 45 years and could make a significant difference in street transportation, housing, and job creation for the community. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe as soon as you're done with the questions so that he can take you through this more specific district for Santa Ana.
Thank you. Councilmember Peñalosa, any questions right now? Or no?
No questions or comments, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Let's go to the next part. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add, Councilmember Iglesias, this was funded by SCAG, the board of which you sit on. They funded the EIFD portion of this study, and they were able to secure Cosmont Associates free to our taxpayers to do this portion of the study. So the rest of this presentation about EIFD is all because of your work on SCAG.
Thank you. So what SCAG saw in Santa Ana is exactly the same thing they saw in Placentia, to be honest with you, and that's why Santa Ana was chosen for one of these pilot project analyses. Among those things that SCAG saw were areas with high potential for development or rehabilitation in the relatively near term, 5 years or so. Also areas that support mixed use and higher density type development with zoning already in place to support that. Number 3, we saw infrastructure, transportation, and otherwise that could be catalytic and supportive for that future development. Again, because the infrastructure is the real target for EIFD funding. And number 4, it's not infrastructure that just benefits a specific project or set of projects, but infrastructure that could be community-wide and regionally beneficial. And 5, because of the amount of property tax that the city of Santa Ana receives and other potential partners, that we saw a high level of feasibility in terms of actual dollars available through one of these districts, like EIFD. So very briefly, at a high level, what we're saying is we're seeing the picture getting better with both OZ and EIFD legislation. We're seeing with every legislative session improvements, some notable ones in September of 2018. We saw that now EIFDs can fund maintenance with the passage of SB 1145, which is huge. So not just capital expenditures, but maintenance of infrastructure. And we see that theme continuing. One that we're currently tracking, Senate Bill 5, is one that would allow not only someone like the county or other special districts to contribute to your EIFD, but the state itself via its Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund dollars. So SB 5, not passed yet, but if it is passed, would enable the state as a potential financial partner in EIFD. This is the picture of the world that Larry already talked about, EIFD sort of on one end of the picture, and we're seeing among the other tax increment tools out there, like CREA, that's the Community Revitalization and Investment Authorities, the AHA, the Affordable Housing Authority, and others. We're seeing EIFD as sort of the most versatile, the most flexible, and we'll get into it in a bit more, but among the reasons are they don't have to be contiguous, which benefits many communities where major development projects may not all be contiguous in one area of the city, which gives us some flexibility there. Some other attributes of EIFD, again, the focus is infrastructure. It's not brand new. The law came out of the existing IFD law, Infrastructure Financing District law, but in a nutshell, the focus is infrastructure and affordable housing. The district lifespan, the council member Iglesias' point, is 45 years if you want to go that long. Very notable in the Placentia example, that district was only approved for 20 years from authorization to issue bond. They chose to make it shorter, to be more conservative and more targeted. So there's no requirement that you have to go the full 45 years from authorization to issue bonds. You have up to at your availability. The entity that governs it is the separate entity, the Public Financing Authority, as Larry mentioned in Placentia. That's comprised of both city council members and county board members, as well as members of the public, since all of those are important stakeholders and important in that situation. Both the city and county are contributing increment. There's no public vote to create an EIFD. There is, however, a public vote required to issue debt, a 55% vote, either by landowners, by registered voters. In a boundary like the one we're looking at in Santa Ana, where you've got more than 12 registered voters within your boundary, it's a vote of voters. If somehow we drew a district with 12 or 11 or less registered voters, then it would be a landowner vote. Schools cannot contribute tax increment even if they wanted to this time around. It's different from RDA. And the last point on here, this is not an increase in property tax. We're not talking about community facility districts or business improvement districts where another item pops up on the property owner's bill. This is tax increment where the entities participating, like a city or a county, they're basically choosing to set aside a portion of dollars that would otherwise go to the general fund to make infrastructure and affordable housing a priority, earmarking funds for those special purposes. CREA is similar to EIFD, but different in a few specific ways. Importantly, number one, they've got to dedicate 25% of their funding to affordable housing. 25% of CREA funds must be dedicated to affordable housing. EIFDs, I mentioned, can fund affordable housing if they wanted to, but they're not required to spend any specific amount of money on that. Also importantly for CREAs, you've got to qualify to use them. There's different ways to qualify based on income, crime, unemployment, a variety of other metrics, but Santa Ana, in the different scenarios we looked at for boundaries, could meet this qualification criteria. The qualification is not a problem in Santa Ana. Those are the major differences here. Types of projects that these districts can fund, in a nutshell, it's infrastructure and affordable housing. Infrastructure, I will say, though, is very broadly defined. You can see more clearly in the EIFD legislation, they've got this long list that starts with the words including but not limited to, and they go off to list these and others: roadway, water, sewer, storm drain, anything related to transit. I mentioned affordable housing, but they also list things like parks, open space, childcare facilities, libraries, brownfield remediation. And again, that list started with the words including but not limited to. Why agencies are authorizing districts, it varies community to community. One point I do want to emphasize is number 3 on this list: ROI, return on investment. The reason why the county signed on to Placentia, the reason why Placentia authorized it on its own, is because they saw a positive return on investment. They were choosing to dedicate property tax dollars only because the return on that money in other property tax dollars, other sales tax dollars, all the other funds that continue to flow to the general fund justified that commitment of future property tax. So beside that return on investment fiscal case, these are approved for affordable housing purposes, for climate action goals. It varies community by community. It could be to support transit connectivity. It varies, but as Larry talked about, these are being evaluated and formed across the state. We're now at 5 districts approved throughout the state. Most recently was Placentia, just a couple weeks ago. The area that we looked at with input from staff, and I believe the subcommittee in the past, is over 3,000 acres with really the nucleus in the downtown area. A little over $2 billion in existing assessed value. When we look at the new development potential that has not yet occurred, we see over $1 billion in new potential over the next 20 years through a variety of projects I'll talk about in a second. But again, what we also see in this area is overlap with low-income, disadvantaged community census tracts, significant overlap with opportunity zones, which I'll show in a dedicated map in a second, but also SARDC, the Regional Transportation Center, the zoo, former OC register site, portions of the future streetcar alignment, and your Midtown specific plan. These are all sort of inputs into how to draw the initial study area boundary. I will say this is just the study area boundary. We're by no means committed, married to this boundary. If this committee and the council want to go forward with this exercise, this can be adjusted. Certain portions can be carved out. Portions of the city not shown here can be added in. This is just the first look with SCAG's funding to see if this made sense at all.
Well, did you look at other areas? Was it mainly the OC streetcar and the downtown aspect that drives this as a primary area, or did you consider other areas and ruled them out for other reasons?
Yeah, the main focuses were exactly those that you mentioned. A lot of it was around Sardic, the zoo, OC Register site, the downtown core, but also with some wisdom, in our opinion. I think what staff saw is if we're going to get other people's money, like the county, we might as well take advantage of the fact that they share in this civic center
And
community
assets.
going
Okay,
on here.
that's a good point.
And they
Right.
could definitely stand to benefit from infrastructure
their
that benefits
consent.
this area.
Right.
Joe, if I may, we also wanted to consider two potential future grade separations. So that's why we stretched out in this one area up to 17th Street as well, and then it hits the one near the train station.
Right, that's very important. Thank you. Yeah, Vice Chair?
Yeah, maybe I missed it in your presentation right now, but who's paying for this?
So far, it's been SCAG.
No, I know for the study, but I'm saying for development, for the 2.1 billion, because, I know SCAG doesn't have that money. Yeah, but, it's, it says does not increase property taxes, so who's paying for this?
So the 2.1 million to 1.1 billion, that's a private investment. Those are developments that will come in, the value that they are contributing through their investment to actually develop their properties. And it's these districts that are set in place to capture that value. The actual dollars that flow into the EIFD bucket end up being contributions by either you at the city level, future property tax dollars, and ideally, other folks that agree to partner with us, the county of Orange, perhaps the state through their educational revenue augmentation fund dollars. That's really the foundation.
And this is probably like redevelopment where you essentially freeze the property tax amount to a certain year, and then future growth or, property tax increment, it's that new extra money that can be used to pay for infrastructure and other things, right? Is that generally the
Correct.
same dynamic?
Property tax is $1
Right.
today, and in 2 years, it's going to be $2. It's that increment, that extra dollar, that then a portion
That
of
will come
that gets
to
put
us.
into us, comes to us for use in the E EIFD.
Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to have a sit down with Stephen, because I don't get it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so from a property owner or business owner, they're seeing no difference whether or not this thing exists or not. They're paying the same property tax rate they would whether an EIFD exists or not. It's an important point.
So, Stephen, you said something about having it stop at 17th Street, or what was it?
Well, you see the blue, we first concentrated on paralleling it with the opportunity zone, of course, downtown government facilities, because, we have to get the county on board with this, so you might as well make it a little appealing to them. But then we thought about what kind of big infrastructure projects are coming up. We know that there's a study on the grade separation of 17th, taking the road under the train on 17th Street, and then taking the road under the train on Santa Ana Boulevard. So we wanted to make sure we stretched up to 17th Street, included some of the retail centers that needed a little work, and then we went down 17th Street. So that's why you see that jagged line up on top, because it goes deep into some of the retail centers that need some work. So if we have a tool to offer them for off-site improvements, it could help them get the on-site stuff done. That was our logic. But again, this was for a study. We created these lines so they could study and had some parameters of which to study this in. SCAG didn't open up the checkbook. It was a limited checkbook to do a little bit of work, but certainly if there was something we missed or we wanted to steer this in the future, you can. And like old redevelopment plans, you could have 2 or 3 of these study areas over the next 20 years. You can expand your area.
But the whole notion of this is value capture, right? You use infrastructure, these kinds of investments, you use the opportunity zones to attract capital. That creates new tax revenue. You collect it and you spend it in this district to further improve the district, which then drives more investment. So it's a cycle of economic investment in infrastructure that then yields new projects in housing, jobs, commercial, and so on. It's a cycle of investment that you're trying to induce.
On this page 50, we covered most of this. On the bottom left-hand side is, again, just sort of the very beginner's list of the type of things we'd want to be funding in Santa Ana. We talked about station connectivity, sort of Sardic, adjacent areas, grade separation was identified as a potential, utility improvements, parking and other facilities. But again, this is just the beginning. It's part of the feedback that I think we would want from this group, this subcommittee, and continued discussions is, what are the priorities for this community? What are the things we want to pay for in Santa Ana? Some of the major projects that, when we talked about over $1 billion in new development value, working with staff, we just identified a few of these, the parcels highlighted in red, labeled in purple. Again, Sardic area, Warmers Oak, MCAL. A few of these where we know private sector is going to come in and invest. And we'd like the district to be in place, ideally before that value hits the tax rolls, so we can benefit, so the city, the local community can benefit and use those dollars in the community priorities like affordable housing and infrastructure. Development assumptions, so within that boundary, really within those projects we just highlighted in the previous page, is sort of how we define that over $1 billion of value. Variety of land uses here, residential, commercial uses, hotel uses. We make some assumptions, we think conservative, about what the values of those are when they're built out, and that's how we total up to our over $1 billion in the bottom right. We sort of have to run that new value through the filter of how the property tax dollar gets split. We mentioned earlier that the city, on average, this is just really an average, city gets about 19 cents for every dollar of property tax. The county actually gets less, a little over 6 cents on the dollar. And then you have all these other entities that receive a share, really small shares. Small shares aside from school district entities, which, again, very importantly, cannot contribute even if they wanted to. That's a pretty big difference between RDA and today. Now, when I mentioned earlier about Senate Bill 5, what that would essentially enable is the state could choose to dedicate some of the dollars that flows to them through this Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund, this third line item, as well as the sixth line item. Those are funds through SB 5 that would become available for the state to invest in your EIFD if it were passed. Again, SB 5 is not passed yet. Aside from your 19 cents on the dollar, the city also receives something called property tax in lieu of motor vehicle license fees. It's equivalent to another 12 cents on the dollar of property tax that would be available to the city to contribute if it wanted to in some portion. We ran, honestly, a variety of different scenarios. In this presentation, we're just showing two revenue contribution scenarios. The first one is, just to be honest with you, maybe probably not one that we'd recommend. This is what it would look like if the city contributed all of its property tax increment and then the county matched with all of its property tax increment, just to show you sort of revenue capacity through one of these districts to sort of get down to it at year 50 total cumulative dollars at $580 million. The point is that there is significant revenue capacity in this district. What was agreed to in Placentia, and what we think is sort of a good basis for conversation, is we call the 50% contribution scenario. This is what it looks like if the city and the county were to contribute each just half of their future incremental property tax dollars to this district. What that looks like, and shown on this table, are at year 5, you're at 1.4 million in annual revenue, cumulative up to that point. That's year 1 plus year 2 plus year 3 plus year 4 plus year 5. That's your $3.4 million. And if you chose to issue debt, you don't have to, but if you chose to issue debt at year 5, we're seeing at a preliminary level bonding capacity at a little over 13 million. And of course, we look at that again, year 10, year 15, year 20, and then cumulatively over the 50-year lifetime. And just want to emphasize again, these are just sort of scenarios chosen for the purpose of this feasibility analysis. We are in no way, the city is in no way bound or committed to this sort of contribution scenario. This was just the preliminary look to give you a sense of what's available in terms of revenue. We often look at complementary funding sources. So it's not just the tax increment itself. One of the benefits we're seeing of these districts is that it elevates your priority to receive other types of funding. Among those, things like state and federal grants. We're seeing more and more so at the state level, things like your cap and trade ASIC grants, Affordable Housing Sustainable Community grants, your infill infrastructure grants, also at the state level. These are funding sources that are being prioritized for communities that are looking to promote affordable housing and sustainable infrastructure. There's a lot of emphasis on transportation, by the way. All of those elements we're seeing as potential in Santa Ana. Of course, last one on this list, Opportunity Zone investment. That's one that's in place just by nature of the federal tax code, and we ought to take advantage of that in any case. Those are dollars that are incentivized sort of on its own for private investors to come in and make those investments so they can benefit as much as possible from those capital gains, deferrals, and forgiveness. Very quickly, I'll run through these maps pretty quickly. I think this is part of the wisdom and the reason why the boundary was drawn the way it was at this preliminary stage. A lot of transit priority area and high-quality transit area overlap in this downtown area and the adjacent areas. All that means higher priority, again, for grant sources. On this page 58, disadvantaged community census tracts, again, priority specific. They're very specific in priority for cap and trade grant funding for areas that meet this disadvantaged community census tract designation, which we do in this area and other areas of Santa Ana. And then opportunity zones, significant overlap in this preliminary study area. All reasons why this was chosen as a preliminary study area. So not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the way it would go forward to form one of these districts, some of the major milestones, that significant outreach at this level, staff, the subcommittee, the council, with the community to figure out what would a boundary look like, what could it look like, what sort of levels of revenue contributions would be feasible to the city, and we'd want to be talking to folks like the county to see whether they were interested and under what scenarios they'd be interested in partnering. Then you're preparing your plan, number 4, your infrastructure financing plan, which really more so than redevelopment forces you to be very clear on where you're going to spend the money. You've got to outline it pretty specifically in this financing plan, where you're going to spend the dollars. That plan has to be circulated to the public. There's eventually there's a mandated public hearing. Both really the city council, the county board would have to separately meet if they're going to contribute dollars, and then that hybrid entity that includes both the city and county, if both are contributing dollars, they would have to meet and approve. That's what happened for Placentia and Orange County on July 31. More immediately, but this is just legislation prior. I talked about this before. SB 5 is the one that we were talking about that allows the state to contribute. We expect other bills that have fallen by the wayside in this year to come back in future years' legislative sessions for things like easing the process to issue debt by one of these districts. Among others, there could be other enhancements in the future. So again, the most immediate next steps that we're seeing, we want to incorporate feedback from this subcommittee on things like you were already bringing up, areas that we could either expand or cut out from this district, specific things that we'd want to be funding. Very importantly, we'd want to be meeting with folks like the county, stakeholder engagement, folks like the county who could be contributing dollars to a district like this if it were formed in Santa Ana. And then based on all that feedback, making refinements to the boundary, analysis, revenue contribution scenarios, things like that. And it's only after all that has been properly vetted would formation activities initiate. So that's it. Again, very happy to answer any questions. Thank you all.
Very good. You got through the 63 slides in decent shape.
Not bad.
We didn't have to rush it too much. I appreciate it. Any additional questions or comments from my colleagues? Vice Chair Iglesias, any more questions or comments?
Well, I have lots of comments, but I think this will be more a discussion that I would want to have with Stephen, because this is a lot of information for me to take in on just I mean, are we voting on this? Is just informational only?
It's just information.
And my concern is that we're talking about, even though it's just informational only, but we're talking about increasing some type of tax on someone.
Nope.
And we can do a one-on-one briefing for you, but it's actually increasing the assessed value of the property, which is generating a higher level of taxes. But there's not a tax increase per se in the rate.
No, but if you're assessing a new...
You're currently assessing at the same rate right now.
Okay.
It's the assessed valuation that goes up, generating more taxes off of it, and you're using that growth off of that tax base to do different financing.
Okay, but you're... Okay, I guess I'm just going to have to have...
Assessed value increases.
Yeah, so you're going to increase their assessed value, so then increase their property tax.
But it's also just natural. It's just natural.
Yeah.
It's just natural appreciation on property tax, because you know how every year property values tend to go up. So it's not that the tax rate is increasing, but the revenue received increases as the property values increase.
Right, so whether we do an opportunity zone project or adopt an EIFD, just like your property taxes are at home, you own your home, your property taxes are $1,000 this year. Next year, even though there's no change in the tax rate, your property taxes go up by $20 because just the assessed value of your home has gone up, there's an increase in value. And so the tax rate stays the same, but that $20 increase, that's what, that change in assessed value, that increased tax amount is what we would now have access to invest.
That's why they call it an increment.
Right,
But
so
this
in-
is a very dense document,
It
and I
is.
think, one-on-ones with council members would be helpful. Councilmember Peñalosa, anything?
No comments, thank you, Chair.
I just, because we have a number of other items, I would just, the first thank you, for the work. I think too, this is also just kind of like a case study. It's a case study, gives us a sense of the type of revenue it could generate, what our share is versus the other agencies. I like to the thinking of, a percentage so that, the county doesn't need to give all of it, and they might be willing to give some. But I would be interested in what other possible areas might be, because maybe in some ways there isn't too big of a downside in having multiple areas. Then obviously there's more management work, but pretty good tools. And I also like now that you could do maintenance. Before, you could build stuff, but then you couldn't fix things, and that also made things complicated for cities. So
Yeah, I was going to add, it's a little bit different than redevelopment. This is more like a business plan. You
Right.
figure,
I'm aware.
right?
Yep.
Right, you
Yep.
figure out the area, and then you test other areas
Right.
to see if there's a better business plan.
Right.
And that's what our next step would be. Yes, absolutely. I think you've got it perfectly.
Very good. And again, we know that you just put it on our radar, and you'll continue to
That's
do work. And I'm
correct.
sure via staff there'll be briefings, and if there are more formal actions, that's important. But I also like the catch-up. We do have some major pieces of infrastructure, like the grade crossings, that we don't have identified resources from, either internally or from OCTA. So this would provide good resources there that would help with the infrastructure, but there's also a lot of safety concerns for pedestrians and motorists. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to item number 3, to receive an update regarding how we finished up the fiscal year. Director Downs.
Thank you. Just bear with us for a second while we get the PowerPoint up. Thank you.
Before she begins, I would like to point out that we haven't officially closed the last year, so this is really an update of where we're at as of July 31st. We still will continue to adjust as things accrue back to the fiscal year.
Before we move on, is there an opportunity for us to get this soft copy to us, sent to us? Yes. please.
Yeah, we have that.
Okay.
Okay. We're focusing for this budget update on the general fund because that's what was requested to provide the update. Our general fund revenues, our most recent estimate was $263.8 million of total revenue. And we have shown next to that the actuals received through July 31st, as the city manager mentioned. We will continue to take in receipts related to fiscal year 18-19 that we'll continue posting for the next month through August 31st. So we expect those actuals to go up. And at this time, this is the best information that we have. The Measure X sales tax, I would point out the third installment for that quarter. We should find out what that dollar amount is on August 21st, which is next Wednesday.
That's probably the big delta between
Yes,
the May 13th estimate and this.
that is correct. Okay.
For Measure X, that 9.4 million is from April 1st through July 31st?
Actually, it's the accruals through July 31st, but you can think of it as the period of April and May. But it's not even really April and May because the state, when they pay sales tax for each quarter, they give you 3 payments for each quarter. So they pay you April and June, they pay you May and July, and they pay you June and August. There's a 2-month lag. But the April and May payments, they're estimates only. So the third payment for each quarter is the big true-up payment where you get your actual dollars. And so I have found that the state's usually fairly conservative when they send their first 2 estimates. And so that's why I think that we will easily hit that 15 million with the third payment, the true-up payment, where we'll find out our actual dollars. Okay? And then for the expenditure side of things, this is the amended budget as approved by City Council. And then we have our actuals through July. For this, we will continue paying 18-19 invoices probably through the end of September, because you typically pay through until your auditors are doing their field work. So we will continue to accrue invoices. I think that we will end up coming very, very close to our budget of $262.4 million. Right now, so far, we've paid out $257.6 million. Let's see. Oh, and the appropriation adjustments that were approved by City Council on June 18th to move budget from Public Works and Clerk of the Council for election savings. Those, the City Council approved moving those budgets to the City Manager's office and non-departmental. And our actuals fit within those amounts that were authorized by City Council. So once we have our final numbers, we'll process those budget transfers as authorized. Any questions on this slide?
On the PD
Yes.
item, is there still just a lot of things in flux, or it is?
The lion's share of the PD budget is employee compensation.
Right.
Employee compensation has already been paid, so we already have those numbers. There is a little bit in flux. There are some outstanding invoices to pay, but the police department has some other sources, some of their other restricted monies that they can pay those invoices from. So we do expect that they are going to pretty much, I'll use the term, slide into home base on their budget. We think that they're just going to be within their budget.
So you think it's going to be that close?
Yes. It's going to be extremely close.
Well, where is it now? For all these other items, you did try to offer a precise amount. That one, you just, it's a copy and paste of the prior column.
Yes, that is true. They are slightly over budget right now, but their expenditures haven't been fully analyzed, and we think that some of those expenditures are more appropriately reclassified to some of their restricted monies.
Okay. Just reconciling.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Director Downs, I had a question with the Parks and Recreation and Library, Parks, Recreation and Library area. I just was thinking that, we need as much money as possible to go towards Parks and Rec.
Sure.
Because I know that across the board, all our parks are in desperate need of facelifts and just staffing in general. So I'm just trying to understand why there's the actual amount spent in the Parks and Rec department, and maybe Lisa could help. I saw her, she was here earlier.
She needed to go to the planning commission.
Oh, okay. Because there's like an $850,000 difference in what was actually spent to what was in the amended budget for the fiscal year. Can I just get an explanation of that difference of why?
Sure.
Or where that money is, or why it wasn't spent in the
Sure.
Parks and Rec?
We're going to continue paying invoices on that budget through the end of September. So that 850,000 gap that you see right now, it's not going to be 850,000 by the time the books close. We still have more invoices to pay over the next 6 weeks or so. And then on top of
for 18-19.
That's right.
fiscal, okay.
That will be posted to 18-19. And on top of that, some of these unspent budgets, we're going to request City Council permission to carry those forward to 19-20. And that'll be up to the City Council to decide whether they approve that or not. But so for example, we have a total budget of $262.4 million, right? So let's say that we come in we close the books and we've spent a total of $261 million, and we have $1.4 million left. There are going to be requests that are going to come forward from departments for City Council consideration to carry over that unspent $1.4 million, theoretically, that's not the real number,
Right.
To the next fiscal year, 19-20.
The only caution I would have there is we've made some very public promises that any leftover money is going to the youth fund that has already been shortchanged from the cannabis previous account. So hopefully we can really keep certain things down. I mean, yeah, maybe if there's some big unmet need that wasn't provided in what was approved for the next fiscal year, but I think, you know, we did quite a bit to shore up resources in all the departments, and
Right.
I would hate to, you know, give regular departments more and take it out of the commitment that we've made to the youth already.
Understood.
I have a question.
Yes, Vice Chair?
So, why do we have surplus money? If we're, at the beginning of the year, we cry that we need everything under the sun. And then at the end of the year, there's money left because it hasn't been spent. And it happens, it hasn't been spent in that department, so why do we ask for so much money to be allocated if we're not using it?
Most of the unspent money is related to projects that are in process, and they just haven't been completed yet. So a prime example of this
So
would
then
be...
why are we not keeping that money for those projects?
Well,
Maybe
that's
allocate it
exactly what
for-
we would ask to carry them over for. So I'll give you an example. Once we've paid out all the invoices for fiscal year 18-19, we'll find that we have some money left over in the Planning and Building Agency. The Planning and Building Agency is working on the general fund update, general plan update, I'm sorry. And so they're not complete with that yet. I'm sure that they are gonna ask to carry over some money, their unspent money to 1920 to continue working on that general plan update and finish that project.
You know, and oftentimes there are estimates, if let's say you're gonna buy 2 trucks, and let's say you think it's gonna be 100,000, I do want staff to get us a better deal, so if rather than paying 100,000, they could get it for 90,000, we should do that. And then oftentimes, you know, what's fiscally conservative is to take some of that surplus money, put into reserves or other areas for, you know, downturns in the economy, or, you know, in this case, again, I think the council and the staff knew that the youth fund had been shortchanged a little bit from their cannabis dollar commitments, and so there was the thought of putting some there. And I think as a matter of financial policy, sometimes we have to put money into the reserves if we don't have enough there already. So surplus money could go to that as well. I have a question on page 2 regarding the jail revenue. I'm unclear on whether we've maxed out the marshal's contract general interest. I know there's been, I mean, it's been a good year, maybe also 2, since we really thought that we were going to get them to full capacity on their intention. But I vaguely remember that between staffing and opening up the new module, that maybe there was delays in getting more of that in. Can you give us an update on that?
Certainly, the last conversation that I had with the chief, and I don't believe we have anybody from the police department, was that the U.S. Marshals can increase their capacity so they could take additional bed nights.
Right.
And then the one thing that we had talked about with council was that we wanted to seek an increase in the nightly rate that we're currently under contract with the U.S. Marshals.
I guess my question is, why is there a holdup? They've had that commitment for 2 years.
Well, you didn't have the last component completely finished in order to access those beds, is my
But what's the
understanding.
timeline for it? Again, we've had 2 years to do whatever we need to do there.
I can get a
Yeah, could you?
definitive date for you on that, and then I can also provide you the rate that we currently charge and the rate, because right now there's a discrepancy between what we charge for the U.S. Marshals contract versus what we charge for our pay-to-stay program.
Right.
And we're looking to raise the U.S. Marshal rate up to
Right.
at least the pay-to-stay.
Because we need to be very mindful, even though, I mean, this is good revenue from these agencies, the jail does have a fairly substantial operating deficit in the millions of dollars. So there's no reason why whoever's managing that jail isn't completing that agreement, because it could generate maybe another $2, $3, $4 million. I'm not sure, but it's substantial. And again, it's been 2 years in the making. You haven't been here 2 years, but it's been, that commitment's been there by the marshals a very long time.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Peñalosa?
I agree with what Councilmember Solorio said in regards to the jail. You got a chance to tour it, I think, but I toured it last fall, just right after the election, and I I did notice that there was one whole wing that was completely empty at that time. That was in November. And I did ask those questions, why is there a whole empty wing when we could, because there is a deficit and there is a loan on the jail, a bond that we need to pay off. Why can't we maximize the amount of beds, the amount of people in that jail because of the empty wing? I'm not sure if that wing's been filled since, but
I don't believe it has, but I can get the details for
Okay.
when that's coming online, if it's not online, and what the rate is, and what a timeline is to
please, yeah,
achieve those.
that'd be very helpful. And with the general fund expenditures, is that transfers column still the bond payout for the jail? The 11,
Yes, it is. The fourth line item down on the general fund expenditures, the transfers, the 12.3 million, and the actuals 11.9, yes, that is for the debt payments. The difference you see between the amended budget and the actuals has to do with the transfer to the strategic plan fund. So there was several $100,000 to be transferred, or no, more than that. There was 1.8 million to be transferred to the strategic plan fund. And we've been transferring it based on actual expenditures in that fund. So as we incur the last couple of months of actual expenditures through September 30th, then we'll continue making small transfers to meet those actual dollars. And that's why you see a difference there.
do we, I'm sure we do, but what is the amount owed on the jail bond?
We have 5 more years of paying on it, and I believe that the annual debt service, now this includes both principal and interest, is, I think it's 6 million. Yeah, we can look it up. Yeah.
It could be an email.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Yeah,
It's
we can do
fine,
that.
but, I do agree with Councilmember Soloto. If there's, the management of the jail should be capitalized to be able to pay down this debt quicker.
Okay.
Vice Chair Iglesias, any other questions?
Just going back to trying to understand the surplus money. So if there's surplus, is there something like on the city charter or our policies that any surplus goes into the general fund for future rainy day funds? Or is it?
So with your surplus, what would happen, and when you're building your budget, you're estimating what your expenditures are going to be for every single department. You're never going to hit exactly correct, so there's a lot of moving pieces. So some of it could also be you had employees that leave and there were vacancies that happened throughout the year. That would result in less expenditures at the end of the year. Right now, since this isn't the final figure for the end of the year, you still have the outgoing expenditures related to things that were incurred in your last fiscal year that are going to increase these amounts. And the third thing that Catherine had mentioned is sometimes you have a project that didn't get completed and you're going to seek a carryover of that amount to finish it. But it's certainly at the policy level for the council to make that decision. In absence of any policy from you, what would happen is just a matter of fund accounting. Your general fund, if there was excess revenues over your expenditures, it would just go in the fund balance.
But we do have a financial reserve policy.
You have a
It's not in
reserve
the charter, but
policy,
it's
and you're
it's an ordinance,
currently,
yeah.
you're exceeding what your
Yeah,
reserve
correct,
policy is.
Correct.
And what's our reserve policy percentage?
17,
It's, there's 2 pieces to it. One is just an operating reserve of 16.67% of your annual budget. And then the other piece of it is a reserve for economic uncertainty that is a minimum of 1%. But the way the policy is written is that the desire is to be somewhere, between 1 to 10%.
Okay.
That minimum of 1% we've calculated, and when we did the mid-year, when we submitted the mid-year RFCA to the city council, we had estimated that you will end June 30th, 2019 with 11 million more than your minimum reserve policy, but it doesn't take you all the way to that desired, when I say 1 to 10% for economic uncertainty, it doesn't take you all the way to the 10%, but you are over the minimum. And so depending on where we land, we'll give you those final numbers and where you're at with your policy level, and then the city council as a whole can decide what they'd like to do
And
at that point.
when does that come to us for a vote?
When we close the fiscal year and we have the actual numbers, we'll present those numbers to you, and then you can make a decision at that time.
When is that? I'm trying to understand, because when I was on the school board, it was by June 30th we had to have it. So,
That would be very rare to have if your fiscal year ends June 30th, to have your numbers calculated. Many cities, it takes September, October
Okay.
before you have your final numbers.
okay, yeah, it was like, I'm sorry, it was like in, at the end of July, early August when we had it. So then by our first meeting in August, we would be talking about it.
Yeah.
That's
Typically, we know what our final numbers are in October, and the auditors finish up their work in November. And until we get the final opinion letter from the auditors, basically blessing our financial statements, we're hesitant to release our actuals because they may come back with another adjustment for us, another audit adjustment. So when we know that the audit is complete, which usually happens sometime in November, that's when we're comfortable in releasing the information to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. We know we'll be hearing more about the budget. Maybe through the city manager, we do spend a substantial amount of our resources on public safety stuff. Whenever we have budget-related things on our agenda, there should be representatives from our two largest departments here. Next item is item number 4, an item that I had requested. We've had various conversations about addressing our homelessness crisis, and the dollars for the private park security. There's some public works maintenance dollars that will be helpful, but I still kind of feel like we don't have a complete answer yet on how much new resources or programs we're doing. Also looking at a few months, we'll be receiving, the grants from the state for various homeless and housing-related projects. We kind of got to start thinking about what we might do with those, and then beginning to think about next year. So if we know where some voids are, we can begin to think towards that. So if staff has a presentation, which looks like they have, that'd be great. Thank you.
So based on your request and knowing that you wanted to discuss this, Catherine did put together, it's sorted by department, but it will show you what the enhancements were made for the current year. I will tell you, I haven't deployed all of these resources yet. We're still working on a...
This is good. This is
Okay.
You want to talk about it?
Oh, sure. So the first box there that you see was the original community development operating budget for homeless services, our baseline level, if you will, of $175,000. During the fiscal year 1920 process, the City Council improved some dedicated budget enhancements. So we have the Public Works cleanup team, which includes vehicles, contracts, and some maintenance workers for that. And then we have the Community Development Agency. Additional money was added for storage and fencing, as well as part-time staff. And then most recently, on July 16th, the City Council approved an allocation of another $100,000 from our unclaimed deposit revenue. And so that has been added to the budget as specifically dedicated to homelessness. On top of that, in the third box, we had some additional budget enhancements that, while not specific to homelessness, can very much contribute to those efforts. And that would be the 2 code enforcement officers that were funded by the general fund in the planning and building budget, and then the enhanced park security of Parks and Recreation Department. And so with all of those resources together, we have total resources available of over $2 million for the current fiscal year.
Yeah, that to start, and maybe on your third column, we could probably make the case that some of the new police staffing positions can count towards it. So hopefully maybe we get to closer to $3 million. I think for the general public, even $3 million out of $60 million is, seems like it's a very minimal investment towards it. But we've had conversations before on how, there were clearly shortfalls in staffing and need to restore many other programs, positions, et cetera, throughout the organization. And we will have, grants and other things coming into play. The only reason why I wanted to have this conversation is that as other programs either come and go, if we can find more resources, I think this is a good area. This and the youth sides, I think, are kind of the weak links in terms of what we're offering to the community. So I really just do want to stress that whenever there are extra dollars towards homelessness or youth programs would be fantastic. On the youth side, at least through the cannabis fund, there's a little bit of a mitigation that there's new dollars there, but that just the need on the homeless front is so big that we got to keep doing more. I do like the idea of saying that the code enforcement element is significant, because I've shared with some of the staff, and I don't know if my colleagues have seen, but in Costa Mesa they have a new homeless guide, and they kind of really differentiate that they have PD deal with enforcement of anti-camping on public areas and code enforcement on private areas. Because, really as a matter of, land use and other policies, you shouldn't have, trash or people living in landscaped areas or things of that matter. So there is, an accountability piece to, what property owners are doing. But also I don't want to rely too much just on being aggressive with our private sector folks, because since we're not handling anti-camping everywhere else, that folks end up on a lawn of a McDonald's or on a lawn of a CVS. So that I think is an interesting way of addressing the issue, and I think overall all the departments I think are cooperating towards this effort. So maybe the second column, some of that maybe ties in with the quality of life. Because I know, City Manager, I think there's been talk of maybe expanding the hours or making some shifts there. Is that where maybe that would come from, or how do you do that?
Yes, those additional enhancements, particularly the cleanup team with the staff and equipment, definitely enhances the COLT team. So some of the things that we're doing with these resources is we're going to finalize the city's homeless strategy to present to you for approval of a strategic plan. You had a draft document and it was never formally adopted, so we'd like to move forward with setting forth that plan. We are looking at developing our own homeless resource guide, which would be something that we could have our police officers have. We can provide to nonprofits, we can provide to churches. It's something that good citizens can rely on, as well as even a homeless individual. One of the things that we're looking at is reevaluating the COLT deployment hours. So currently it's Monday through Thursday. I believe it's 9 to 4. And working with the homeless, I think some of the best opportunities to get them to avail themselves to services is usually done early in the morning or at sunset. So we're looking at that. And weekends, definitely.
Right, for sure.
And the other thing is we've been trying to, because right now, we've had, and you guys have definitely heard from residents, that who do I call? I see a homeless person that maybe needs services, or I see an encampment, or I see debris. How do I report it and who do I call? And I know you guys have been getting emails on that, and then you'll forward it to me and I'll forward it to the appropriate place. So one of the things that we're working behind the scenes is improving the 24/7 app that we have, where you can register things with the city. And right now, if you look at it, I believe it only has one, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's one category that's just called encampments. I don't believe it even says homeless on it.
It's just debris left.
Debris.
Yeah.
So one of the things
Debris
that
and
we
dumping.
we want to do is actually clearly identify homeless in there and make the distinction between private property or public property, to the extent that the person reporting it knows where it's at, because that would route it to the appropriate person a lot quicker than calling around and making sure you're at the right place or sending in an email. So that's something that we're hopeful, see if Jack nods his head, to launch by the end of October.
Yeah, we're shooting for October.
Okay.
He's been working on it, so I'm sure he's.
End of October. I was told October 1st. Now it's end of October.
Fall.
I'm gonna hound on this app because we need it. The residents need it. But Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
may
go
I?
ahead,
And thank you for really bringing up that difference between a private property or a public property and the homeless encampments that pop up at both, and who is responsible, whether it's PD or code enforcement. And that's, just last night I I sent a couple pictures to our city manager, and I included Fuad in there, and Public Works Director and our chief, because it is a private property, and I knew that. But my idea is that, well, how I'm seeing it is, this is, those encampments had been there for a couple weeks, over a month, right next to the zoo, and I'm driving by, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna ignore it. I want to see what kind of, whether it's private or public.
Elks?
Yeah. I'm more of a, and just to let staff know, and I wish, Christine, that you could, put this message out there, is that if they see something, say something in regards to enforcing the anti-camping laws, whether it's private or public. Yeah, a police officer probably doesn't want to get tied up in because it's a private facility, but make a note of it and try to, see it. You know what? I'm going to put this for code enforcement to check it out. Not just ignore it. Not just drive by and ignore it. And same with Public Works staff driving around. Don't just ignore these encampments. Along with, as well as us and residents, staff, police officers, Public Works employees, Parks and Rec employees, they're also eyes out there on the road and driving around. So if whoever sees it should be making in a request or a call, whether it's on private or public property.
Especially if it's 3 weeks later or a month later or whatever.
And there's no reason why something so visible on such a public street, on First Street, should stay there for 3+ weeks. That's something that, I'd like for us to really, get our staff across the board to hey, you see it, report it.
Along those same lines, one of the thoughts I had too, and as cities do this with potholes or whatever, we maybe ought to have, now that we're going to clear up the communication of who to call or email, whatever, say it needs to be done within like 2 days. There needs to be a city response to it. Sometimes there may be more process, but other times it is, more simple. It's part of it, it's person power, no question about that. That's why even on the quality of life team, if there's other ways of augmenting staff, either by, nonprofit contractors that can help, that's another little bit of a weak link. Yes, Vice Chair? Mm-hmm.
So this goes back to my question when I requested it from the city council, when we were having a city council meeting, was I know the private or the businesses, they have a form, and this is the no trespassing form, and I think it's Form 6, there's a number to it.
Yes.
And I know in Anaheim, the businesses they fill it out and they have 6 months to a year, I think, of giving permission to the PD to go in there and enforce the no trespassing. Versus here in Santa Ana, it's every 30 days they have to fill it out, every 30 days. So I think that is very
Cumbersome.
For the businesses to be doing that. So is there a way that we could align our processes the way Anaheim does it? And I believe this was something that the chief said that he was already working on it, but we haven't received update on it.
He has implemented it because just today we had, I think, a constituent that reached out to the full city council, and he wanted information on that aspect, and the chief personally wrote him an email that advised him that this is the steps he would have to take, and it would put that letter on file at the police department that would only have to be renewed every 6 months. And the police would be able to enforce no trespassing on that particular private property.
Okay, so is that something that we are promoting on our website with the businesses?
It's on the website. I don't know if it's super easy to find on there, but it's something that I have told every business that's contacted me with complaints, is that this is a tool that you can certainly use to put that letter on file, and then if you're closed and the police are driving by and they see someone that looks like they shouldn't be there, they're able to actually do something about it.
Okay, so how long has this been in effect? Because going back to what Councilman Peñalosa was saying, it's like I drive every day and I'm like, there's no way that city employees, the police department didn't see this. If I'm seeing it, why aren't they seeing it? And I've let it go and I let it go, but sometimes it just gets very frustrating that why isn't it that they're they're not reporting. Perfect example, and this is why I was very upset, at McFadden and Harbor, the Walmart shopping center, the Riverview West shopping center. There was an encampment that was forming on the side of the sidewalk and also next to the businesses. And we have a substation for the police department there. Now, you're telling me that they didn't see it every time they went in and out, and no one was reporting it? So that's what's kind of like, what do they take our community as? Like, really, I'm like, they're not gonna say anything, it's Santa Ana anyways. I mean, that's a perception that we have from our residents and from our businesses, because they say, we call PD, they don't do anything. So if this is something that we need to really address and tackle, because it's getting to the point that, people are just like, they're losing faith.
Yeah.
They're losing faith in our, in our staff, they're losing faith in our police department, because they just take us for granted. It's Santa Ana, you know what, they're not gonna do anything. But if you go down a little bit further, south, you're in Costa Mesa, Fountain Valley, you don't see that. And it's only within a mile radius, you don't see that in Fountain Valley. But yet in Santa Ana, it's there. But for me, it was like, I think what really got really frustrating is knowing that we have a substation there, and this was growing and nothing was being done. That was very disrespectful of our community.
And you all raised an excellent point. I mean, we have hundreds of employees that are out driving the streets and
Right,
seeing
right,
things, so.
right.
I'm blinded.
You have a different night color now, Christine.
I can't see anymore. But we certainly.
For quite a bit far from it. Just move the mic.
But certainly, that is something that we can do as an internal campaign. We can educate all of our crews, everybody that's out there on the streets, that, be aware of everything and give them the tools so that they can report that. I know sometimes people are looking at, this is my job, this isn't my job, but certainly we should take advantage of the eyes that we do have out there to do that. So that is something I would be more than pleased to implement.
Yeah, that's something that I would support you on, and whatever we can do, let me know.
And I,
Go ahead.
we'll double down on that because, I have friends in not just our police department, but numerous police departments around the city that I grew up with, and they tell me straight up, we don't want to deal with it. The smell, the sight, we're not in the police business to deal with homeless all day. And you know what? That's the number one key thing affecting our neighborhoods today. That's what you're going to deal with. If you want to be a police officer in our city, that's your job. I'm sorry,
Right.
because it's affecting the quality of life, and there are a lot of them are causing problems in our nearby cities, and that's where again I'm coming from. If you see it, report it. Use the app that we have residents use to report these things, so that the appropriate person could take care of it. Whether it's code enforcement, whether it's public works, whether it's a police officer, somebody should stop these from growing or lingering for so long without anyone doing anything about it.
If I may just say something here.
Yes.
I'm one of the people who stop and, report it on the app, and I even follow up. And it's a policy in public works. Most managers and many of the, senior staff, they do the same. And unfortunately, it's those incidents that you see that, of course, you make notice of, but there is so much work that we take care of that neither you nor many of the residents will see. And we can provide you with information and data on how much work we do.
Oh, I know. I know you guys, and as well as the police department, as well as code enforcement, as well as public works. I know you guys are busy.
Yes.
I know that, but I'm not saying pull over immediately and clean it up. I'm saying at least make a mental note at the end of the day, forward it, or put it on a schedule for the week.
And I assure you, believe me, we do. And most staff, in public works, they do the same.
And I think of my first job at Disneyland. I was 16 years old, and one of the number one policies, why I think it's so clean, number one policy is whatever level employee you are, if you're walking, and you see a piece of trash, a cup, a popcorn, pick it up and throw it in the trash can. That's why it's always so clean, and you see the employees walking around, and they you don't have to be a custodian to do it, and it's something that works.
Take pride.
Yeah, you take pride in the city you work in, and you help clean it up.
Yeah, and I think what staff appreciates, or at least we hope that staff appreciates that, the need is humongous and a lot is done and it takes time and expense. But by that same point, this helps you maybe 5%. This is a very minimal additional investment. You know, again, really to the point that I'm still embarrassed that out of 60 million, this is what we're doing to address the homelessness crisis, especially if it was largely marketed as 60 million to address, you know, homelessness, 911 response times, et cetera. On the PD side, you know, as the chief in open session said, you know, it's their primary responsibility to enforce our anti-camping laws, and they're not doing it. And I know, I think City Manager Ridge mentioned that there's going to be maybe an effort that when there aren't 911 priority calls, that they try to do some stuff proactively. Recently, again, with the Costa Mesa thing sparking my additional interest, I knew that code enforcement has more opportunity also to address some of these violations and vice versa. And then on the trespassing thing, Vice Chair Iglesias, I know that keeps coming up and we hear that from the PD, but while they may not be able to address an issue or cite on trespassing, they can cite for other things. Dangerous weapons, drug sales, other illegal things happening, fights, etc. So, you know, if there's somebody that's drinking, if there's a violence things going on, it's in private property or in front of somebody's yard, they can act. You know, and yeah, maybe they can't get a citation for trespassing, but oftentimes that may not even be the most serious thing. You know, with the railroad tracks, that's a bigger issue because it's farther inwards and it's, you know, it's a big swath of land. But overall, I don't see the trespassing thing as a big excuse. But again, you know, we're starting. We need to retool the plan. I think in the past it was kind of too broad that it really ended up not being something very visible. And then finally, another thing that sometimes really saddens me and upsets me is we know of all the externality, but what we don't talk about are the probably literally tens of millions of dollars of theft from poor families in Santa Ana that lose their bikes, that have to replace their windows, that lose their cars, that lose their countless number of things. And no one talks about that. And again, we allow that to happen. We allow that to happen. And it's, you know, it's very upsetting to me. So it's not just, you know, for me, this isn't just a policy or a political thing. I mean, we have a poor community and we allow the ongoing theft of tens of millions of dollars in their positions, which is very, very unfortunate. Council members, anything else? This was just really a discussion. Yes, Vice Chair Iglesias.
Just to add on what you said about that no one, you know, calls the thefts and the losses from our families. They do. Our community calls, but they're just so frustrated that nothing is done. So I know that many individuals have reached out to me, and I've shared my concerns with a city manager that, you know, they're calling, but their response from, you know, I guess PD or whoever it is that they're supposed to be calling is that it's a life threat, you know, is it a life-threatening situation? And so they really don't get the, I would say, the communication or kind of like that back and forth trust with RPD, so they just give up. So I feel it's a point that we as a city need to start taking care of our residents, because they have been telling us for the longest time, but no one's listening. So I agree with Councilmember Solorio that I don't think it's a matter of politics. It's just a matter of doing the right thing for our community. So what we need to do, if there's something that we could set in place of, you know, maybe they don't call PD, maybe they call code enforcement. You know, not everybody has an app. I don't use the app because it just takes a lot of stuff. So for me, it's easier just to send an email. So that we have to make it easy for our community to have access to us, either, you know, through email, through, I mean, if those that use app is okay, go on social media. A lot of people, that's what they're doing. They're just going on social media, and it's sad because we have a beautiful city, but we don't want just the negative to be, you know, to be shared. But it's to the point that it's like, okay, we got to do something because no one's listening.
Yeah, and on the subject of the calls, I mean, there's general underreporting, but also some of the calls that do come in, police won't go out and they'll say, so write a report, online. Well, a lot of people, they don't want to write a report online, or you automatically lose a lot there. So again, there's just a lot of under-reporting, and again, there's no global figure on what that property loss says, and it's also an emotional loss when, we probably all as kids lost a bike or something because it was, in our front yard too long. And it's, aside from the fiscal aspect of it, it's emotionally pretty devastating, and so that's why we all continue to talk about this issue and work towards finding more solutions and more resources. So again, this conversation just to spark just additional efforts to get more money, and then also a sense of urgency. When I worked at OCTA, we had a CEO, Art Lay, who really, ingrained in that, and, whether it be the jail, and, we've had this commitment from the marshals for 2 years to make more space for them, or other items. We have our challenges, but this is the town's number one priority. And again, it's not reflected in this dollar amount or in the lack of enforcement out there. But the other thing I'll raise in terms of for staff and PD, something else I discussed with our city attorney is maybe a Q&A, so people know what can you do in certain areas or not, because also sometimes people don't know who to call, or even PD, they don't know what they can or cannot do. I know we've had, for example, in between questions about the panhandling stuff and what you can or cannot do, and sometimes you learn cool things like I had heard that CHP sometimes can help with panhandling near off-ramps, and I did run into the right people at CHP because I do have a relationship with them, and they confirmed that, if it's near the freeway, they'd be more than happy to address it. In terms of how to get the call they said call 911 and just tell them to send you to CHP dispatch, and they will go out there happily. And so, we also are finding all those resources, and we now just need to communicate with the public better as well, so.
One quick question, if I
Yes.
can. Sure. Here, I don't see the money that we're investing at the link. Is that separate?
That's a very good point, and I wanted to piggyback on what the chair had mentioned earlier. This is just your general fund revenues that are programmed for homelessness. There is a lot of other funding sources that is programmed homeless, including the operational cost of the link, a lot of your CDBG money. I can let probably Executive Director Mendoza talk more about the pots of money that large amounts do go to addressing homeless.
There are numbers of monies. The HEAP monies are the major source of monies that we'll be having in the future. The HEAP money is to fund the future MOU with the county for a future site. The current site is being funded through inclusionary zoning. And that is our housing set-aside money, where a developer has a paid, instead of building the affordable units in their project, we have collected $15 a square foot in lieu of them. We've reserved those monies, and the council last year made the decision to use those monies for the link. We would like to replenish those monies, however, in the future, so we're always looking for other sources. It was a directive of the city council to keep in the forefront of our minds to always try to replenish that inclusionary housing money. Beyond that, we have the HEAP dollars. We have some new HEAP dollars we think we're going to be having next year, and we'll be finding a place to use those monies too as we negotiate with the county during the process for the future site. So we're reserving those for when we have them. We do not yet have those monies. Right now, all of the monies that we do have are dedicated to either the link or the future site.
And to make you aware, if you don't remember, within the MOU that you executed with the county, you have a one-time commitment of $3.5 million and an ongoing $1 million operating commitment.
I didn't execute it.
We should also talk about that soon, just because of I know there's been a breach in the MOU, and it's important that we look at it and probably pull out of it.
Certainly, and we can provide you an update. A lot of it is tied to the ongoing litigation, so you will receive a briefing in closed session on the 20th.
Along with the railroads, right?
You're going to hear everything homeless
Perfect.
on the 20th in closed session.
A lot in closed session.
Never mind.
Yes, so we have a couple more items, so good, and again, that we'll be hearing more about this item. Item number 5, we wanted to begin to talk a little bit about kind of future things on the cannabis side, because that is an economic development opportunity for the city. I know staff to some extent has been working on this. I just wanted to show my support for having staff draft policies for cannabis lounges. I think I keep hearing pretty consistently that Palm Springs has a pretty good ordinance on that. I don't know if staff's far along that they could have that as an additional option for consideration next Tuesday night. And I don't think we have anybody here from the city attorney's office or anybody on staff that has.
Chair, I can answer that question.
Yes.
So as the other modifications to the code to streamline things has been continued, we've continued to work behind the scenes on everything. So what
Right.
will be before you on the 20th is absolutely all the streamlining code amendments. We were trying hard to get the consumption lounges ordinance completed. We aren't going to be able to make it for the 20th, but you are correct. We are modeling it after
Okay, good.
the Palm Springs. West Hollywood had some challenges with them, but Palm Springs, it seems to be kind of the ideal model. There are a lot of decision points to get to with it as far as, who's allowed to have consumption lounges. Are they on existing retail shops? Can you have consumption lounges outside of that? What about special events? Do you want to host special events in the city and allow for consumption at those? And how would you regulate those? There are some public safety issues, just similar to what there would be if it's a bar. So we're working through all those issues, but we aren't going to have it done by the 20th.
Well, hopefully with the next set, just because I do have some urgency. And then the second thing, and not that I have any real strong preference, but I think from the marketing aspect, because Orange County is a tourism area, and some people, could, or on the investment side, whether it be Opportunity Zone or what it might be, I think it might be a need to name our cannabis zones, green zone or green opportunity zone or cannabis opportunity zone, and that way it's not just a generic, map with, our two industrial areas, but something, low, fun and usable, doesn't cost any money. And so I would just ask that as staff internally works on this issue or works with the industry, that you do some brainstorming and, maybe you come up with something and it's a no-cost thing, but, oftentimes having a snazzy map or something that helps market the thing can be helpful. With that, I know Councilmember Peñalosa also had an interest in having this on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with what Councilmember Solorio said, and the reason, why I have asked for staff to start looking in the city attorney's office at consumption lounges and specifically the city ordinance in Palm Springs that I also looked at, and I know that's one that I had read in numerous articles. One of the things that according to the law right now is people could consume cannabis in the privacy of their own homes. But we often, when we were talking about this initially, I wasn't on the council yet, but the idea was to drive tourism. You're going to have tourism, and we have 30+ million people that visit Southern California every single year for the local resort districts. And currently, you can't consume in public, which I'm okay with, and you can't consume in hotel rooms and people's hotels. So you're gonna miss out on that big chunk of revenue from tourists not being able to participate in something that was sold as, hey, this is going to drive tourism, but that's not the case because there's nowhere for them to consume. So that's where I kind of started looking if we were to look at having potential consumption lounges, or at least start looking at the ways that it could be, it could be all the pros and cons of it, having it in our city. And, I was looking at just keep it as the currently 30 permitted licenses that we have in the city, keep it, to them, or just look at different ways that we could execute that. Those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Vice Chair Iglesias, any thoughts or questions?
No, you guys know where I stand on it, so I have no comments. I just think it's a shame that we're even talking about it, so that's my comment.
Very good. Next, anything else from staff? But again, we just wanted to share our thoughts on that. Item number 6, an update from Public Works regarding AMI. Automated, or some people say advanced meter, or smart meters, a lot of names.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Solorio, and members of the City Council, Peñalosa and Iglesias. Happy to be here. My name is Nabil Saba. I'm the Water Resources Manager for the City of Santa Ana. Item number 6 is to provide you with an update on Advanced Meter Infrastructure, AMI. This one? AMI is a system of water meters that communicate over a radio frequency network with software application that remotely collects water consumption data and detects water leaks and sends alerts and event notifications. This effort is led by the Public Works Agency in cooperation with Information Technology and Finance and Management Services agencies. Some of the benefits of the AMI system includes the minimization of the need for water staff or city staff to read each meter, saving time and labor. It also saves water and promote water conservation with early leak detections and notifications. It offers self-service and more engagement via web and smartphone-based portals. It promotes online bill payments and also provides hourly data of water usage consumption. And again, it sends water user notification of their consumption patterns. Project cost is estimated to be about $16 to $20 million. The project is time frame is from 3 to 4 years. Project will be funded through grants and Water Resources Enterprise funds. We have recently secured about $4.3 million of grant funds from the state of California and the U.S. Department of Interior. Both grants have some limitation and time frame to be spent. For the state money we need to start, and it ends February 28, 2021, but we can renew that to May 1st of 2024. And the $300,000 from the Bureau of Reclamation, we're still drafting an agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation on that. So we really don't know what the time frame to spend that money, but we're ready to really launch that program soon. In terms of implementation of the AMI system, there's various phases of the project. Some of them includes the upgrade of the customer service system and also the procurement or the RFP process, enhancement of the business processes, establishing a consumer and communication engagement plan, and then which also includes a proof of concept, network deployment, and so many other phases. Again, the project does and will take from 3 to 4 years of implementation. Some of those time frames
So
are
if that's the
estimated.
case, why do you have full deployment 24 months?
Yes, some of these activities overlap each other, so it can be going parallel to each other. So the months are not additive, or the duration is not additive, but you can be doing one task or activity while the other one is going.
How many meters overall are we talking about? How many distances?
45,000 meters.
And the idea is to do all 45,000 at once, or like 15, 15, and 15? Or in
It will be a
parts?
3-year phasing process.
And we have all the resources secured to do that?
No, we will be retaining a vendor to do that meter exchange for us. We don't have the resources to really replace 45,000 meters in
At
even
our
3
water
years.
district, down in Molten Lake,
Sure.
we're a few years into it, and we did it in phases just because,
Sure.
just cost, time, but in terms of the benefits, everything you outlined is true. You get real-time data, both as a consumer agency if there's leaks, and that's one of the more important things and billing, et cetera. It's a very
But
good
We
system.
we will be phasing the change, and it's, could be based on the type of meter, could be the size of the meter, could be the reading route that we already have established through our billing system. So we will be evaluating all these options, and we will go with the one that best fit for Santa Ana.
Very good.
I was just going to say, there is the proof of concept phase, which usually encompasses a certain amount of meters they put in first, and then they work out the most
So the proof of
efficient
concept kind of
rollout.
like a
Yeah,
pilot,
it's
if
like
you
the
will.
first phase,
Okay.
yeah.
Councilmember Peñalosa?
The 45,000 meters that's just residential, or is that including
No, that's all of them.
all of them in the city?
All of them. We
Okay.
have many residential customers, about 33,000 residential customers, but the rest of them are commercial, industrial, and they range in size from 5/8 to 6-inch meters and everything in between.
Now, I hope we prioritize in doing those
Sure.
30,000 plus residential first. I would just personally, I would like to see that just because they
Start
are.
on your street.
They are the ones, no, you don't need to start on my street, but that would cause headlines. But, whichever, residential would be, keys.
Sure.
Sure.
You should do like a draw, like to make it.
Actually,
To make it fun,
we are studying the options, and to tell you the truth, there is a lot of benefit of going after the larger consumers first, the large meters, and residentials are, there's so many of them, so it's a balance between what we want to do first and what the priority is.
Okay.
It's not an easy answer for that,
Right.
so,
But emphasis on the residential.
no problem,
Thank you, Nabi.
sure.
Vice
The
Chair,
next
unless
step.
there's anything else
Sorry.
on this slide or general? Okay.
The next step for the process is to issue, we have retained a consultant to help us issue or formulate a request for proposal. We will be sending that out soon, and the proposal is really to retain a vendor to supply, install all the meters and related equipments, including the AMI network, the deployment of the AMI system, installation and commissioning of meter data management system, and also establishing a customer engagement platform for the customers. And also, we will be working with our Finance and Management Services Agency to develop a funding proposal for the project. Like I mentioned, we do have $4.3 million coming in to us, but we still need to look at our finances and decide how to, whether to use fund balance or issue a debt issuance to pay for the project, or everything in between. So we're looking at those issues, and we're looking at our finances to come up with a plan. With that, I'll open it for questions.
You already answered some good questions of variety.
Sure.
Also, there's an upcoming Water Smart grant that maybe you might want to apply
Yes.
again. That's a upcoming deadline, I think, in October, so,
We will.
but you have time.
We're keeping an eye on
They've been
all those
generous with the
grants.
city and a few other local entities. so-
Sure.
Yes, Councilmember Mendoza?
With the web portal, the monitoring would that be able to, and Mr. Chula, this is probably for you, to integrate into our city app when it eventually deploys, so that way, residents don't have to deal with multiple apps. They could do from the city app, be able to access that water portal. And I know that right now with our website, because of whoever supports the website, it's a different portal that it takes you to. It's a different company, correct?
Yeah.
For water payments, and you don't do it through the city website, you click on it and it takes you to a third party?
Yeah, there's
Correct?
right now, there's a partner we have, and it's called Invoice Cloud, that we work with our portal to handle the payments. And so there's still going to be the portal for the utility billing application. There's still where we need to make payments, and then now there's this new component with the analytics from the AMI, where it gets the statistics on your usage and all that. And they're all going to be working together, where you can go to one place and get them all. In terms of an app, the vendor, we're going to be looking at upgrading our utility billing system, which includes the web portal the utility billing system has, and they have an app that allows you to view the web portal information from an app. It wouldn't be part of our city My Santa Ana app. It would be a separate water department app that they would have to access their
And
water account.
Is that possible to make it part of the same app, just like one that could do everything?
Most likely not. We can maybe have one of the apps point to the other app, so you can
Okay,
just
yeah,
kind of
that-
press
yeah.
a
At
menu
least
link and go over
integrate
to
it
it.
better.
But they're two different vendors that maintain two different systems, so we really can't merge them into one.
Because that's, that's something I would like to see, I guess, if we can't integrate them into one app.
Right.
Have our city app, have a second water bill, and it'll take you to the app store if that person hasn't downloaded the app. And then you,
And one thing we're trying to do is make everything that we make on the web be responsive design, so that if you're accessing it through a mobile phone, it'll look like an app, it'll look good on your app. And that was one reason why we moved away from the old website.
Right.
Where, if you ever looked at it on a phone, it looked terrible. Everything was small and you couldn't see it. Now, when you go to our website, things fit in a lot nicer, so.
and that's important too, because the majority of our residents, people in general, don't use computers. They just,
Yeah.
they use
Yeah,
phones
being mobile
and
friendly
tablets.
is a huge priority of ours.
So, okay, good.
Another nice benefit to our residents will be, since we do billing really every other month, sometimes really it may be like 2 months before you had like a big leak, because that's when you see your water consumption data.
Sure.
So it could be 2 months to know about a leak, whereas with real-time data, it could be from one day to the next. And so that's a really nice feature, both for the utility as well as for the consumer.
Yeah, you can set up alerts on
Yeah,
there so that
correct.
you're notified and kind of what your projected next bill is, so you can catch those things.
Right, and leaks, yep. Very good. Any other questions on this? If not, we will go to item number 7. We, oftentimes in advance of the meetings, and again, the meetings move around because all these committees are a little bit different, so sometimes, we probably don't give staff enough time to prepare for having things on the agenda. I do also see that, a lot of committees are just to have conversations and discussions, so, at least I don't expect that everything is, in full detail and complete, but obviously, like today, we get a sense of what's going on and some status on key issues, but it probably is good for us to, or all our committees, have some item like this. From my vantage point, trying to look out to November, I think some areas that we haven't talked a lot about that would be helpful would be an update on our app. Also, an item regarding our website, how that's going, as well as more open data features on our website. And then based on what might be happening with the streetcar and other things, maybe we ought to have a conversation about transit-oriented development. The infrastructure finance district kind of addresses some of that, but to the extent that maybe staff has other transit-oriented development opportunities they want us to begin to think about, at least I haven't seen an update on in a while. And again, with the streetcar coming, we may want to at least think about that. Councilmember Peñalosa?
Back to the, since our next meeting is in November, and then you just mentioned you would like to see an update on the app, I would hope we don't get an update on
Be
the
a
app in
demonstration.
November. I hope it's
Stats
how to App 101. It's been released for a month now.
These are the
This
heads,
is what we've
service,
seen. Yeah, so more of a report. Yeah, exactly, a report on the app usage.
First month report.
Because if we tell staff, let's get an update in November, we're not going to see an app in October, and I was promised October 1st, so I'm holding you to it, Christine.
All right.
But with that said as well, I would like to see a update, not so much an update as well, but just a general conversation on the, not just the transit areas, but different areas surrounding big projects coming up that could potentially, that we could turn into opportunity zones or not sure exactly how that all works. I know I want, along with Councilmember Iglesias, want to have a one-on-one with Steven to go over this 65-page presentation. But yeah, those are my comments.
And then budget, we want to, I think, get an update on where we're at with the budget,
I-
whether
I-
mid-year, whatever that's going to be called at that point. It's always a good thing. Vice Chair Iglesias, anything looking forward?
I don't know if this is a place to bring it up, but the Willowick, with what's happening over there, I have no idea what's going on at Willowick, and I know community members are already protesting the lack of information that the city has not been sharing with the community. So if we could have an update on where we're at with that. Also, I would like to see the, when it comes to, I guess, designating which streets you're going to be either updating or maintaining or making, I don't even know what the.
Capital Improvement Program and the
Maybe that's
project
what it's called.
sequencing.
So I would like to see, okay, you're saying, okay, we're gonna go, because in Ward 6, where I represent, there's hardly any new improvements of streets and stuff. So I would like to see, what's the schedule look like, if that's something that we can have a presentation?
Yeah, and that's in existence right now. We have a pavement management plan, and we have maps
Okay.
that identify those projects.
And then another thing would be, the medians too, if we can talk about that, because I know I'm beginning a lot of requests from neighbors and residents that they're not being maintained, or, what's going on with them. And not only the medians, but also on the sidewalk. For example, on McFadden, between Jackson and Harbor, you have the school, which is Russell. And so we were told that the city has to maintain that sidewalk part. It's all dirt, it's ugly. So, but the school district says it's the city, the residents think it's the school district that should be maintaining it, because as residents, if anything on the sidewalk is our responsibility, even though it doesn't belong to us, but we have to maintain it. So why aren't we holding the school district accountable to maintaining that side of that sidewalk for them? So if we can bring some type of presentation or something like that, who's responsible for what? Because on that side, like I said, the west end, we're the forgotten side of the city of Santa Ana.
What's where you live, Ceci? Just kidding. What? No, it's where you live. That was a joke.
Coincidentally, that's coincidence.
So, and speaking of Ward 6, on McFadden, the bridge that goes over the river, just right before Walmart. Yeah. That whole section, there's no lighting at all whatsoever. And I spoke at what's that school called on
Russell?
McFadden and Rate?
McFadden and Rate.
Continuation school?
Oh, yeah, it's the.
Lauren Grissett. I spoke at Lauren Grissett Academy, and kids came up to me afterwards, after class, after I spoke, and they quietly, and they were like, I didn't want to say this because people were going to make fun of me, but I have to walk home down McFadden, and it's so dark, like after school when it gets dark early. It's like, there's no lighting. They're like, we've been asking our teachers and this is how naive kids are as well, that we've been asking our teachers for years, or telling them that there's no lighting down, but what's the teacher going to do? So maybe we could, and I know that's probably a conversation for another time, but not for this setting, but I would like to see, Fuad, if we could look at that street, see if there's any plans to bring lighting in there. It's that whole entire section from Fairview to just about Walmart on McFadden. On the bridge, there's no street lighting apparently, and it does get really dark, yeah. Is that Jackson?
Jackson.
Thank you.
Good point.
Another, may I?
Yes, Vice Chair. And then some of these also go under committee member, comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about for graffiti? Especially the riverbed. Sometimes there's a lot of graffiti on the riverbed, on the residents that have the wall. So on the wall, there's a lot of graffiti, but then we don't know if it's city, is it county? Who's to call? Who are we to call? I know, right? So if we could have clarification on who's responsible for it, because to the residents, it's like, okay, just get it done. But there's been a lot of graffiti lately, and also people leaving trash, and who picks up the trash? Is it our contractors, is it county contractors? So it's a lot of questions to be answered.
Yes, and that raises a really good point, because I am learning that we have a graffiti contractor, but he only does certain things, and we don't have a graffiti contractor that does other things, so there's gaps that we are addressing internally.
May I add to that?
Yeah.
I think just a general educational outreach in our community about how the graffiti contractor that we have, the graffiti removal, works and operates. Because I've been driving around the city, and I'll see it. Specifically on St. Andrew and Van Ness, there's this house that always gets graffiti. Have a big wall, and it feels like every other week I see the homeowner out there himself. Sure, he has cans of paint in the garage, and he starts painting, and I see him all the time. And I finally pulled over, and I said, "Hey, download this." I feel bad because there's a lot of residents out there that don't know that the city has this service that they'll come and match their wall and paint the graffiti. So we have a lot of residents that are going out of their way, and I mean, good for them, but they see their house got graffitied, and they're like, no, I'm gonna clean it up. But we should let the residents know, hey, if there's graffiti on your property, let us know via the app or the hotline, and we'll come out and match it and take care of it. Just because I know that that service is out there, but we don't publicize it, and people don't know that it exists. And but yeah, those are my comments I'd like to add to that.
Thank you. Staff comments? Any staff comments?
Certainly. Thank you for that. That does help us plan for in advance, and we can prepare more materials. I know, Chair, you had a request that I didn't have time to get the information, so it didn't show up on here, and it was an update of where we were at with our solid waste contract. So, as you know, you've contracted with Waste Management for a number of years, and prior to my arrival here, you were going down the RFP process. It has been delayed somewhat, but it is still, staff will be recommending continuing with it. So I'm trying to gather all the details on some of the financial components of that agreement, and we'll give you actually entire council, a thorough update on it. So one other thing, I don't know if you would be interested in, but Catherine did receive, they're actually early this year, we have the rates for CalPERS for our pension funding obligation. So if that's something you'd like to also discuss at the November meeting. Okay.
Well, the bottom line is it might go up a little bit, right?
Yes.
It's going to go up a little bit, so.
It's changed the pattern from a little bit different than what we had anticipated.
Right.
That would be a good presentation.
Okay.
Yeah. Very good. Back to committee member comments. Anything else? I know we kind of made some as well, but Councilmember Peñalosa?
Yeah, one final comment. I would like to see as well just an update on the capital improvement programs that we have, specifically our medians, but along with the others that we've seen in the city. I know I've heard that the medians in particular have been put out to bid, from what I understand, a while ago.
Just certain ones, to the extent that we have funding, and we do have a great need for improvement in the medians because of the water being shut off. So most of your medians are hard dirt, with the exception of possibly just some trees that are remaining.
Okay.
So we're working on that.
All right,
But we can
perfect.
give you a full update.
I was getting ready this rainy season to just go around and throw grass seeds on the dirt, see if they grow.
Some poppies, some California natives, yeah, we can all,
Seeds and birds.
we can all do that. I just want to thank staff for being here, and our audience members, and we will meet again in November. Okay, there's a holiday issue, so I will read out the next regular meeting is scheduled for Monday, November 11th. But it's a holiday. Therefore, the meeting will be held on Tuesday, November 12th at 5 p.m. So, for the record and for the public notice. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
What?